I think he was going to leave to go on a baseball trip. And he was basically like, if you're not coming, I'm going anyway. And I was just like devastated. You know, I was bumming one day and she was just like, dump him. And I'm like, I've been in this relationship for 5 years. It's like, I'm not, you know, just in the like dump him mode. Punch him maybe, but not dump him.
We did have the dad moment. We were headed somewhere. He got going at a pretty good clip and then hit the e-brake and we slid sideways in the highway, and he stopped and he said, I need to talk to you.
How old were you when he did that?
I was like 16, 17
This
years
is
old.
like a movie.
Yeah.
Totally a scene in a movie.
Take a girl and a guy, and they fall madly in love and form a family. Sprinkle in some counseling degrees and a doctorate. A dream of transforming relationships as we know it. And 20 years later, we give you power couple Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. And this is their podcast, Couples Synergy.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Couple Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jane. Hi, I am Dr. Ray.
And I'm Jean, and this is our podcast about love, marriage, and relationships.
Please check us out online at couplesynergy.com or on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Couple Synergy. And please subscribe to our podcast, leave us a review, or send us any suggestions on topics you'd like to hear more about. And now on to Couple Synergy, an in-depth look at marriage and relationships, where we bring our experience helping thousands of couples transform their relationships for over 25 years.
You know, every day we get to hear intimate details about a couple's celebrations, disappointments, and everyday challenges. We've often wished these stories were shared because we know we are more similar than different. So we've created not only an avenue where you can hear about people's intimate lives, but an atmosphere where people come over to our home saloon, pour a drink, and share their stories.
People like today's guests, Adam and Shastyn, thank you so much for being on our podcast today, guys.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
In person, too.
Yeah.
Yay! Those are my favorite.
So, you know, when we started this podcast, it was 20, I think that was our first
Airing. We
airing.
started recording in 18.
And, you know, we did a lot in the home pub in the Chicago area. And we did a lot of in-person at that time. And then, as everyone knows, COVID hit. And we all had to go virtual, which opened the door to a worldwide selection of guests. And now that we're in Colorado, we've had the opportunity and pleasure of being able to bring people in person again to the home saloon now, not the pub. And Adam and Shastyn are one of the lucky, or should I say unlucky, guests. So, you know, before we get into your story, why don't you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves? How old are you? How long have you been together? What do you guys do for a living?
Okay, I just turned 40 this year, and I grew up here in Colorado, in Crawford, and my family all still lives here for the most part. We've got 3 little boys. We've been married for 16 and a half years, and I'm a homeschool mom currently, and
an avid hunter.
And an avid hunter, yes. I try not to brag about that because it jinxes me. But yes, I like the outdoors, fishing, hunting, just four-wheeling, just being outdoors, which is a good place to be in Colorado when you like that stuff.
Yeah, and I'm in my late 30s for a couple more months.
Yeah, you and Ray share a birthday.
That's right. Ray and I share a birthday. And also raised in Western Colorado. We have a couple of businesses that Shastyn doesn't take any credit for, but that she helps us run. I have a investment consulting firm that I'm the managing partner for, and we run a sawmill here locally, which the room we're sitting in has got a bunch of lumber from that place, I think. So, and then 100 other things that I dabble in. We've got some real estate that we work with, and anytime I get a chance to go spend some time out on the ranch and pretend I know what I'm doing, I go do that too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Can you guys tell us the story of how you met?
Well, there's 2 stories. There's always 2 sides, right?
Oh, of course.
I'm going to tell mine because it starts earlier. The first time that we met, and so one of the, we were talking earlier before we went live that I was collecting knives. I have a lot of weird, odd things that I like to collect, and one of them is really old snowmobiles. And so when I was a child, my grandfather picked me up one day and said, "Hey, we're going to go get you your very first snowmobile." And so this was early 1990s, and we pulled into this yard that was just all kinds of stuff sticking out everywhere, trucks and broke down snowmobiles, and we picked out this really classy 1976 machine, and it was just a little kid's machine, and it was like the happiest day of my life. But there was this girl glaring at me through the window of the house. That was the first time that I met Shastyn. We were buying the snowmobile from her dad. So
How old were you?
I'm going to say I was 8 years old. And so I always tell her that's the first day we met, because when I saw that glare, I thought, I just want that the rest of my life.
You wanted to be glared at the rest of your life.
I'm just kidding.
But yes, that's his earliest memory of me, I guess. But we went to high school together in this small community we have. He went to like grade school and everything in Hotchkiss, and I went in Crawford, and then we went to high school together for the last 4 years.
How many kids were in your class?
60.
60?
Okay.
60-ish.
In high school, yeah.
Yeah.
And so we were classmates. We really started, my best friend about sophomore year was dating Adam. And, you know, she was younger than me, didn't have a driver's license. So after practice and things like that, I was always waiting on her because they were talking and blah, 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 you know. So anyway, so she ended up, I told him one day, or that we were actually out at a party or something, and I told him, she doesn't treat you very good. I think you should just, you know. And then another mutual friend of ours, we started hanging out.
This is your friend.
Yes.
Okay.
She wasn't very nice to him, and I knew that she wasn't, and so I just told him, you know, you really should part ways. And so, anyways, and at that point, I wasn't actually, you know, looking to go out with him or anything. I just happened to tell him that. And so, anyway, and then we had another mutual friend who we started hanging out with, and then she started dating somebody, and then it just left Adam and I. And so I think that was about our junior year, and we spent all our time together and developed into a romance.
Yeah, we really never dated. It was probably longer than a year. We just hung out. We're friends,
Yep.
and some of that I think was conditional to our home lives. And so there's, at least that's how I view it. I think we both needed somebody to count on, and we both just seemed to fit that role. And the friendship was the primary driver for that, and it ultimately just turned into something else,
Yep.
unbeknownst to us.
How did it turn?
Well, one evening we were going out to a party, and it was the friend that we used to hang out with. Her name was Sarah, and she had told me, well, you know, Adam has become interested in you, and of course I had felt the same way, but you know, so it was a really uncomfortable evening, because going from like friends to, you know, more than friends, and she was like, he's gonna ask you out, you know. And I'm like, oh gosh. So she got my hair all done up and, you know, everything. And we went up in the middle of nowhere in the woods or something, you know, where teenagers go to party. And anyways, it was just super awkward. We sat there in like complete awkward silence for a while. And then finally he like, I don't even remember, he reached over and said like,
Have you ever thought about being more than friends?
Yeah, something like that. Have you?
It's pretty straightforward.
That's pretty direct. Yeah, I would say.
I was like, well, yeah, you know, sure, and of course. And then so we decided to become a couple, and then it was just really awkward when it was time to go home, and I was just like, do we kiss? You know, it's like we never like had this kind of like, I don't really know how to say goodbye situation, but I think we did kiss, and it was awkward. And then the next day he didn't want to call me because he said it was just like super weird, you know. And so of course, me being pretty forward, I just called him and was like, hey, what's up? And he was like, thank goodness it's not super weird. And that was it. And then we just that was the beginning of our senior year, right before school started. And then we've been dating since, and we've you know, did long distance through the first year or two of college. And so
How was that?
it was difficult. Very difficult.
Where'd
And
you
so-
guys go to college?
So I went to St. Louis, Missouri. I was playing college baseball out there my freshman year of college, and Shastyn went to school in Denver.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember
It was an interior design school.
Interior design school.
And so we were about 16 hours apart. And so we saw each other, I think, twice, like once in the fall, once at Christmas.
So this is before video chatting and all that
Yes.
kind of stuff.
Yeah, you could text, but just letters for the most part.
Yes.
Like, it
Oh,
was-
did you guys write letters?
we did write a lot
We
of
did
letters.
write letters, sent care packages, and so it was like, you know, when cell phones were still kind of bulky,
And just a phone.
and they were
Just a phone.
they were just like the green screen with the black letters.
Yeah.
And so it was
Play Snake or send a text.
so, but yeah, it was a long year. I flew out once to visit him, and then he was home for Christmas. And then I think we didn't see each other in the spring, but we spent a lot of time on the phone, and
So you guys were still in a committed relationship during that point.
we were, and but it was difficult because he was out there, and you know, with three other roommates. I was living with my aunt at the time, and so he was with three roommates, and there was parties, and there was a lot of evenings where it didn't end well. And so, and we did break up here and there, like for a couple weeks, or you know, but we would always still talk because it was just like he was ultimately still my best friend, and so that was so hard because it was like, you know, we were like, all right, we're not a couple anymore. This has to be, you know, just not working. But
When did you know you were each other's person?
You know, that is an interesting question. So for me, that started when we became really good friends. I mean, I think both of our lives were not the cleanest. Shastyn's parents were. We met shortly after her parents went through a divorce. I had just lost my dad, and my home life was kind of a disaster. My mom was MIA, so I was almost living at home by myself at 15, 16 years old. And so that, when I mentioned that earlier, just that we needed somebody to count on, like, she became my person that I knew would answer the phone, that would show up and do what they said they would do. And so why we, even long distance, I think why we struggled so much, it really wasn't the things I think you would typically struggle with in that long distance relationship. Like we dealt with those things too, but it was a lot of when things weren't going good, you didn't have your person to talk to. And that was really evident to me, that was the hardest part. Was if I had a problem that big in my life, that's the person I would want to talk to about it. And I remember you telling me that several times, just like, I don't have anybody to go to. You're my person to. And this is making that so hard. So for me, it was very early on, just knowing I had an individual who I knew was going to do all the things they said they would do,
That's
and
huge.
support me.
Mm-hmm.
So
which was difficult because he had a lot of soul searching to do those few years that we were apart, and even after that probably too. But there wasn't always. I'm luckily a very stubborn person to stick it out, because there was, I think, a lot of times a lot of other people would have not dealt with it. They'd have just been like, you're too much. And at some point, it was a couple years of doing long distance, and we did break up for about a month. And at that point I did say, like, we're not talking. Like, I can't talk to you and, like, get space too, like I
was going to ask,
if
what
we're
was that
gonna-
like for you?
It was hard. I mean, I was very sad, and it was just the hardest month ever. And it was just, my roommate, which ironically was the girl Sarah I was living with at the time. And we were in Grand Junction at that point, living in an apartment together. And she was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so sick of you being a ball baby. So I'm just like, oh my gosh. And so, anyways, but she was still dating who was Adam's very good friend too. And so, you still know what's going on enough, but we actually at that point cut contact for a whole month, which was different from any other of the breakups we had, And so
Was that pivotal?
I think so, because I feel like it finally at least snapped him out of it and was like, okay, like, I need to straighten up a little bit, or,
We had a
She
minute
might not
like
be here
that
forever.
where you broke up with me.
It was like 10 minutes.
It was a whole weekend. And he said the same thing, like, let's be friends. And I was like, no, I have no interest in being your friend, you know?
Yeah.
Like, if it isn't this, I don't really, you know, and I think women know that.
Yeah.
But on the other side, where men and women can't really be friends, women forget that.
Yeah.
They think the guy's just interested in them as a friend. No,
Yeah.
that's not true.
But what was the soul searching that needed to happen at that time?
You know, Shastyn mentioned something interesting. So I remember before we left or before I left to go to college, I remember telling her that I think we should break up. Like, and in hindsight, it was like I kind of knew I was just a mess, and so I was just mad at the world. I was, you know, mad at God. I just decided that all these things that had happened to me were just, you know, I just couldn't rely on anybody, trust anybody, and it was just let's just go have a good time, and I'm just gonna go wherever the wind blows me. And it was an extremely lonely, you know, handful of years of my life. I just think I always like to say, like, I don't really understand, like, the concept of depression that's not really my normal personality, but I think there was probably a lot of that there, and I just didn't even realize it. And then the conditions of the environment. I went on a college baseball team. We traveled all over the country, town by town, and it was just not a healthy environment for me to be in, and in that mental state too. And it was just destructive for about every relationship that I had in any closeness. It just destroyed every one of them. So that didn't answer the soul searching question, but I didn't know who I was, but I also didn't care for quite a number of years. And so that was, in hindsight, it's interesting to think about that. I don't have a bunch, like, there's a gap in memory even, like, and you guys would know better than I would if that's normal, but like, there's just blocks and years of my life I have no memory whatsoever of.
Well, if you think about the age you are when your dad passes, and then your brain development is catching up. And then when you're getting fully integrated and really understanding the scope of that and starting to even start to process, yeah, you stay in that place of fight, flight, or freeze, and you just sort of live your life, and then you pick your head up one day and you're like, what happened?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big loss.
Yeah, so Shastyn has been her mom would even say that she's been an adult since she was a little kid. Like, she's just very responsible and well put together, and
She was glaring at you, buying a snowmobile at 8.
that's right. Yeah, and I think really what she was telling me was it wasn't a good use of our funds.
Oh.
Like, as a moment, you know. But
In reality, a side note, my dad was very good about buying us things like old snowmobiles, and then he'd be like, it's yours, you know, and then he would end up selling them, you know, because, and so you're just
So
like,
he bought your snowmobile.
yeah, it was actually Caleb's, my younger brother's, but, you know, we were like, somebody else is here buying us.
but that part was, you know, the complete opposite of everything in my life, and as those years went on, eventually after that break, and we made a decision. I was moving to Oklahoma to play baseball down there. We decided that we would go together, and that was the first time we actually ever, outside of when we were in high school, I mean, we basically, like, her dad was a really important person in my life too, because he gave me a place to stay. I could get fed there. He would help me fix my car when it broke down, and so it was more than just a relationship with her. I became part of their family, and her brothers, and we're all that core group. They're still, we're all really close. Like, it was, her dad's a whole nother topic, but he's really has a gift in that regard, and just kind of took me under his wing. Although he wasn't a big fan early on, so. And in fact, maybe you want to tell that?
Oh, he just told me one time when I was like, you know, had told him we were going to start dating, you know, and we were no longer just friends. And he told me, you know, Mexicans are the kind of people we are friends with. We don't date them, you know, like, and I was just like, Dad, which he had never struck me as a prejudiced person, you know. I mean, it was like the first time I had ever heard him even say things, but like anything of that sort. But it was, I don't remember. I just told him, you know, I don't care what you think, of course, because I was a teenager, and it was just like, I don't see him as anything but who he is, you know, and I don't blame him for being protective, and you know, so
Well,
but he
that
loves him now.
that kind of sentiment is kind of indicative of the old cowboy era in this area. Would you guys
Yeah.
say? I mean, you guys
Yeah.
grew up in this area, so you know more.
Yeah, I mean, we have a huge transient workforce here, right? That comes from south of the border, and you live here, you exist with them, they're your friends, but there's two different cultures that don't tend to blend or associate, and so that was probably part of it, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, we had that.
we did. Yeah,
Your cousins wouldn't come to our wedding because I wasn't Persian.
Yeah.
So we had the opposite, but
and
It
I mean,
took
obviously,
a
the
while to
Chicago
resolve.
area, there's a lot of prejudice going around. I think it's not just isolated to just two different cultures,
Right.
In multiple cultures,
Yeah.
everybody hates everybody, but
Yeah,
well, I always said, that's what'll change the world is love. Like if the people fighting over in the Middle East, if the kids fall in love, that'll stop.
Yeah.
And without that, you just can compartmentalize people.
yeah,
So
yeah, and I don't think he hung on that very, very long.
once he got to know you.
Yeah, I mean, we
Yeah.
spent so much time together. We did have the dad moment, that you
No.
sometimes hear about, but
Did it involve a shotgun?
no, but it did involve an SS Camaro, and we were headed somewhere And
Down the hill,
down the
coming
hill
from
into
Desperado.
the Smith Fork Canyon, and he got it going at a pretty good clip, and then hit the e-brake, and we slid sideways in the highway, and he stopped and he said, "I need to talk to you."
And it was dark. Didn't he
It
turn
was
off the
dark.
lights?
He turned the headlights off. We're just sitting in the middle of the highway sideways.
How old were you when you did
I
that?
was like 16, 17
this
years
is
old.
like a movie.
Yeah.
Totally a scene in a movie.
I remember thinking like, if I could kick the door open, I could probably run faster than he could. I could dive and hide somewhere. But he was really respectful, and he just said, like, how much I care about my daughter, and I'm like, yeah, and he's like, I need you to do that. If you're gonna be in a relationship, you gotta care for her, and you gotta take care of her, and I need you to tell me that you're gonna step up. And I'm like, yes, sir. And like, what else are you gonna say in that moment, But it was really kind of like after that point, I felt like it was just like not an issue. It was just we had to exchange a few words. He let me know how important that was to him, and I don't know that we ever had another issue. So
Did people know what you guys were going through when you were living apart?
Some of our friends did, I think, just because they were there. Like Sarah.
very
she
few
was-
though.
But very few.
Because that's always tricky, like the judgment on the other end if people
Yeah.
are really
Yeah,
well aware.
I figured out pretty quickly not to tell my mom
Mm-hmm.
many things, because she would just, it was even right before we got married, we got married when we were 23, and, we were still going through issues and things, and it was about, I don't remember what happened, but he was, I think he was going to leave to go on a baseball trip or move. And he was basically like, if you're not coming, like, I'm going anyway. And I was just like devastated. Like, how could you do this? Like, we've been traveling around for these years, and we're supposed to be together. And she basically was like, I was bumming one day, and she was just like, dump him. And I'm like, I've been in this relationship for 5 years. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm not, just in the like dump him mode, punch him maybe, but not dump him.
Did you see I've learned
I know you kind of flinched a little
Yeah.
bit.
How did that impact you?
What-
What you guys were going through during that time and having to get it like straightened out in your head about what this was and who you were going to be as a person?
Yeah, I think I didn't really have. I didn't talk to a whole lot of people about what was going on in our relationship or just in my own life. I don't know that outside of Shastyn anybody knew what I was going through on the inside, and so there was there was two parts to me, right? The one that everybody else saw and who I really was and what I was really going through, and eventually what ends up happening there is one of those people has to die, and that was the process that I was working out, and even in my own mind trying to understand, like, what am I doing, or why do I make these decisions? And that was more than just a couple year process. I mean, I think I spent a decade in that sort of a mode.
Were there any pivotal moments?
There were a couple of pivotal moments. I think that when we moved to Oklahoma, we lived together, we lived life together, we paid bills together. It became like it got real really quickly, and I think also evident that there maybe was more in store for us moving forward than just that was one of the pivotal moments, was just the decision that a baseball career wasn't a great life choice for me because it was just a bad environment for me to be in, and I wasn't having any fun. Like the fun aspect kind of went away, probably even when I was in high school, but it was a way out. We're talking about some aspects of the West here.
Mm-hmm.
When you grew up, the only way you got out was you better be good at sports and get a little money to go, or you're going to be a
rancher
or a coal miner. Yeah. Those are your three choices. And so that was my ticket. I mean, growing up, that was the only thought I had in my mind was I better be good enough to get out of here. And funnily enough, here I am. We live here again. But yeah, that was one of them. And I think, one of the other ones was, years later, I had some really important people in my life. That a good friend of mine who grew up with, who really shared a lot of insights into how should I unpack that. And so part of that was just even where I was at spiritually, just how frustrated. Kind of we started at the top, and one of the main things that I think that really triggered me was he told me, you're a pretty smart guy. You really ought to make a decision on this. Like, what do you believe? And go from there. And he's going, I don't care one way or another, but riding the fence is not, that's a terrible decision. And so I started on that pursuit of just like, I'm going to address this with God and try to understand. Like, I was just hurt, I couldn't understand why I would lose the most important person that I had in my life at such, at 14 years old. And so I just started down a path of spiritual exploration, just trying to understand like that dynamic between who I wanted to discredit as my creator and who he really was. And Shastyn was a big part of that, of just trying to help me understand what I believe, and then I can decide about who I am based on what it is that I actually believe. And so do I have morals, values, and ethics? I mean, it was a lot wrapped into that ball of if you have those, you're probably not going to make the same sorts of life choices and decisions. And that happened kind of in our early 20s. We were trying to get a business off the ground. And honestly, I think that was the turning point for me, was really just, I kind of looked back at that period of my life that it was so chaotic. And there were so many situations in there where I should have died, or something terrible should have happened. I should have been arrested. I should have all these things, and none of them happened. And the business that I got an opportunity to get into, I looked back, and that all stemmed back to this the terrible day of when I was 14 years old. After that, I met an individual who was in the investment business. He came to help my mom take care of some finances and became a good friend of mine. And as I reflected and looked back, there were so many blessings that came out of all this chaos that I just couldn't discredit it. That there was someone other than me that was guiding in the situation. And so I eventually just gave Christ my life, and I decided I needed to make some major life changes, and I wanted to be a good husband. And we had our first son Hector in 2013, and for me that was the other pivotal. It was like I get to be a dad, like the person that I miss so much. Now I get to be that person, and who do I want my son to see me as, and how do I treat him? How do I treat his mother? And I just took it really seriously.
And Shastyn, you kind of watched him go through all of these stages. And, what was pivotal for you, and Why did you stay all during that time?
Because
Can I answer this one?
Because I'm stubborn.
I always tell the boys, your mom stayed with me because she saw I had potential.
That's right. That is what you tell them. Well, I mean, there were definitely, we went through a lot of ups and downs through those years. And I do feel like he finally said it, but I do feel like him becoming a dad was like when I saw a complete shift. Like he had other things happen over those years, but it's just, I feel like whatever it was that he was lacking or searching for, I just felt like it somehow made sense, or it just helped him to be more whole, or maybe it was just the father-son relationship, even though he was on the other end of it. I'm not really sure, but I do feel like when Hector came along, he really, even I remember my aunt one time saying like, oh, Adam smiles in pictures now, and I just thought, I never noticed he wasn't really smiling before, but I feel like that he did have a shift when we had Hector. And why I stayed, I don't know. There are times I just felt like we were meant to be, I guess, and it was just I think there was a lot of the fact that my parents had got divorced, and I was like, that's not going to be me. I'm not, like, I just feel like we can work this out. And I did see potential in him. I felt like he was a good man, and he just needed to get it sorted out. And I felt like I probably said that to him many times, like, get your shit together, because like we need to work this out. And I don't know. We've both had our moments of just whether it be something crazy or silly or whatever, of just like, get yourself together moments where one's breaking down and the other one was like, you need to suck it up and stop being such a baby about it. So.
And I think too, the way our brains are developing as women, as young girls, when we go through puberty, our brains rewired to want to be pleasing to someone else.
Yeah.
And so like, that's that investment. On an intuitive gut level, when did you know you could trust him, or do you?
I do now, but the long distance and the things that we went through over those times, there was always girls at parties, or girls would grab his phone and say something and then hang up, and then I couldn't get a hold of him. Things like that when we were, yes, it was a lot of things like that. And just over the years, there was lots of little stuff like that or whatever, just not telling the truth about where he was or whatever. And so we've had a long road back to trust, and it's been, I don't even know how we've come back to it, but it has been a long road of just, me trying to put trust out there and saying you're trustworthy now, and him being trustworthy. And so, because as you guys know, it's like at some point somebody has to extend I'm going to take the chance a little bit on this.
Yeah.
And so, and I think that too, a lot of just me getting, more closer to the Lord, I think has helped me too, to just know that like he's not my everything, because and that I can trust the Lord to watch out for me, and I know he's watching out for us, and I think that has been a huge thing for me too, because I think over the years it was just, I don't think I struggled with trust a lot, and I've dug into that a lot too, of just not only with him but just parents and different things, friends when I was younger. I mean, even when I was in kindergarten and elementary school, I remember, just getting betrayed by friends and things. And so I think that just that was a long line of me, having a hard time with trusting people. And so, but no way, we have a good trusting relationship now, and but it's been work.
Yeah, I think trust really stems from trusting yourself.
Yeah.
And that you would hold yourself to some standards where
Yeah.
maybe in the past you didn't.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the female journey.
Yeah.
And then you get to a point where you're like, yeah, I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
And all those insecurities and fear of abandonment and all that become less important than how you're going to show up and how you let people show up with you.
Yeah.
Hey, you guys had kind of mentioned your parents and growing up. How has your parents' relationships impacted your relationship, in positive ways, negative ways? How has it impacted?
I think it's been unusual to get to learn how to communicate with each other, because growing up, my family are fighters. They, yell. They're just, they're very vocal, sometimes physical, and that's how they deal with things. And Adam's family is a lot more passive. And so even just learning to communicate with each other in those ways has just been sometimes like pulling hair out, because it's, he's like, quiet down, and I'm like, speak up, and, and so it's just, we've had a long time and a long go of just learning how to communicate with each other because of the way we were raised and, what's normal to us, I think.
Yeah, and I think we both, are my grandparents are both still living. We're going to celebrate 65 years of marriage here in June, and we're a great example for me. I mean, their life has got problems just like everybody else, but they're just best friends. They have the way they love each other and care for each other, and especially these later years, we've got some cognitive issues with my grandfather, and just watching how the patience and the love that my grandmother has, and like it's just really special. And so that part's been there. My parents were for the most part, I feel like we had a pretty traditional upbringing. Had a mom and a dad in the house. We ate a lot of dinners at the table. But there was a lot of dynamics that didn't work. My parents actually separated about a year before my dad died, and so I kind of got to experience this where when I was told, as a kid you don't get any say, and it's like, well, we're splitting up, and so for me I'm like, well, I'm going with him, and because I don't want to stay here with you guys, and like it just started the division. You get to see that, but so my dad was born and raised in Mexico. He immigrated here when he was 14 years old. Him and his two cousins, all 14 years old, they came here by themselves. He was just a really strong person, and a lot of the issues that were happening in our household was because my sister couldn't wear skirts, and my dad would always just say, like, I know what happens to girls who wear skirts, like it, and I would love to know all of the things that he saw growing up, but he was very rigid in our house. There were rules and everybody abided by them, and there was no questions, and it just kind of broke at some point. And so he moved out, and that was a really difficult time, but also I look back and I got to see him. I remember driving, he lived in Cedar Ridge. You'd get up to go to work at the mine. I'd get up with him. He'd drop me off at my mom's house. I would eat breakfast and go to school, but we would talk on the way in. And I just remember him telling me, like, I gotta learn how to love. I gotta learn how to love. I don't know how to love. Like, I gotta figure this out. And he went and got counseling, and he just really, it wasn't like we're broke up, we're never gonna get back together. He's like, I'm gonna figure this out. We all moved back in together about 3 months before he was killed.
Oh, wow.
And the best 3 months. I mean, everybody got along. We were laughing. Everybody was happy. And I'm very thankful for that time. But he set a really good example, just the little bit that I know about his life and what I got to witness with my own eyes. Like, he was adaptable. Like, and he knew what was important. He came from a terrible family dynamic, never knew his dad. And he just set such a great example for me. And so that, for me, really shaped that when we were talking about when Hector came along. Like, how
old is Hector now?
He's 10.
So 14, your dad.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Yeah. And so it did shape that because it was such an important person in my life. And I just didn't want to screw that one up. It was like, I better figure this out.
So how'd you guys get engaged?
So we moved back after I was done playing baseball. We lived for a little bit in California.
Did you quit, or did they let you go?
I quit.
Okay. Wow.
Yep. Yeah, and
Playing D level or what?
so I played I played a year of junior college, and then I played a year of Division II baseball, and then I had several opportunities. This is, how smart I was, but I turned down lots of Division I offers. I played a really short season of minor league baseball, which was not a healthy place for me. So it was just something that just had to go away. And so one of the things on my bucket list, though, of things that I wanted to do, or both of us really, I wanted to try my hand at being a wildland firefighter. I just thought it would be a really cool experience. And so we lived in California for just not a half a year, maybe something like that. That was probably one of the first tests. We're going, out there pulling a U-Haul. We get there in this rainstorm. Shastyn turns down the wrong road.
We're in different vehicles.
Yeah.
He's
I'm
pulling.
driving behind her.
Yes, he's pulling a truck behind the U-Haul, and I'm in our car.
So, but she was kind enough to take me through downtown Reno, Nevada. Anyway, we had like these. We just went under pressure together, though, for the first time. I felt like California was good and bad, but that was a fun experience. But it was really, I kind of reflect on a lot of things, real selfish stuff from my standpoint. It was like, well, I want to do this, so this is where we're going. I want to do this, so this is what we're doing. And
Men are selfish? What?
I don't know about that.
That comes up on like every podcast.
But
It actually made me feel
went
better.
along.
Yeah.
I went along, and I got to fulfill some things I wanted to do. He was wildland firefighting. I worked a couple of different jobs out there, but I always wanted to be in hospitality. So I got a job just by calling around at a bed and breakfast out there, and made some really good friends, an older couple, and got to house sit for them, which I had a few guests of my own because they were regular people who came out. But then we moved back. My great grandmother had passed away, two of them, and my half brothers were little. They were 3 and a year and a half or something, and I just said I don't want them to grow up not knowing us, and not knowing me. And so we moved back, and while that was 2006, so we were home for about not quite a year, and it was Christmas time, or almost Christmas time, and I make these Christmas cookies around Christmas, and only around Christmas, because I don't want them to be ruined. And so we're living in my great grandmother's house that my dad owned, and I'm mixing up cookies, and Adam was just acting really weird. He's pacing, and he's like, sitting up on the heater thing, and then and I'm like, what is your problem? Like, why are you acting so weird? And then I turned around, and I don't remember what he said to get my attention, but I turned around.
I said, do you ever think about being more than friends?
No, you didn't. But
I think that's the title of this podcast.
I think it is.
I turned around, and he was down on one knee with an engagement ring, and I'm like, oh, that's why he's acting so weird. But anyway, I don't even remember if I said yes or if he asked or whatever. I just was like, oh yeah, of course, absolutely. And of course, at this point, we had been together for 6 years, living together for 3, I think. And so I actually, when we were in California, we lived out there. I thought one night he was going to propose, because I came home and he had like candles lit and like a rose or something. And I was like, this is it. He's proposing. And he didn't propose. And I'm like, what the heck?
Were you kind of waiting?
I was. And I had asked him at one point, which I don't know why I didn't walk out then and leave, and just like
Potential.
Potential.
But at one point out there, I asked him, are you ever going to ask me to marry you? And what did you tell me? When I'm ready to ask you, or when I want to marry you, I'll ask, or something is what he said. And I'm like, maybe I've gotten meaner as I've gotten older, but I'm like, why did I not punch him in the face? Like, just slap him and leave, I'm like, what a mean thing to say. But I don't remember my reaction even. Maybe I was just, like, well, okay, what a not nice thing to say or something. I don't even remember what I thought. But anyway, maybe I blocked it out.
How did you get the ring?
So I actually went, her oldest brother, Caleb, and I talked to him and said, hey, would you go down? I want to try to pick out a ring for your sister, and I want you to help me with it. And so what ended up happening was Shastyn ended up down there with us, and so Caleb just ran defense while I went and looked at.
Because we were Christmas shopping.
Yeah, so I had a ring that I had found that I really wanted to get, and so So I went in and I think her brother, you thought I was nervous. I mean, he was sweaty hands, and I got back and he's just like flop sweating. Like, good. And so that was a really fun experience though, just getting to kind of have him involved in that. And but yeah, it was, it wasn't a shotgun by any means, but we didn't have enormous resources, and so it was just like, we're gonna pull this thing off, and these are the few things we need to get it done. So we kind of started to put those in place.
Did you ask anyone before you asked her if it was okay?
Her brother's the only one that I talked to before that, and so he was, we're always been really good friends, and I think his response was like, it's about time, so.
That's cool.
But outside of that, no, I didn't.
So up until then, was the plan to remain here in this area or to move on at some point?
No, we came back and lived here in this area for a couple years. And Adam actually was working at the wash plant up at the coal mine because my uncle ran it, and he gave him a job. And
I was going to school.
And he was going to school, and so he was trying to get into the finance business. And so that was just, you kind of get home where and more people to have jobs and everything. And I don't know if we really planned on moving to Grand Junction, but that's right after we got married, or the year we got married, we moved to Grand Junction and bought a house there. And so it was growing up, we always want to end up here because it seemed like such a settle, because it's a small community, and you're just like, we don't want to not be anybody, like we want to be, successful. We want these things. And we felt like, I think early on, that we couldn't do that here. And even when we moved back, we knew we wanted, once we had kids, because we lived about 6 years in Junction, and we knew we wanted to move back and be closer to family so our kids could grow up with grandparents and everything close by. But I think we were very reclusive for the first few years when we moved back, because it was just like, we're very private. We didn't want people to know anything about us. I don't know why. It just kind of
interesting
how you grow up, because in a small community, everybody knows everything about you. And it was just like, we just, I don't know.
Now you guys know everybody.
Yes, which we did then too. But it was like, there was a lot of years where we were here for many years before people even realized we lived here, because we just kind of like,
It almost sounds like a period of time, like an incubator where you're developing yourselves before you show up back.
Yeah.
And you're different people at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that describes it really well. I kind of felt like I didn't want the outside influence or the opinions, because what we're, the little bit of opinions that we did get were not positive contributors. And so,
not positive about being here, or
no. So like, for example, when I was finishing up school and I would work, Shastyn's uncle gave me this job I would work like, I think it was like Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, a 12-hour shift up there. And I remember telling my mom, like, hey, I got this opportunity with this guy, Jeff, that was this financial advisor. And he said he'd take me under his wing and train me. And she's like, why can't you be happy with what you have? It's like, why do you got to go get creative? And so we kind of went in that way, because it was just no support there. And it's like, you just can't have that sort of negative talk, because we're never going to make anything happen that way.
It's like, you're a coal miner. That's the best job you can have around here.
Yeah.
Whereas
you're
it seemed
part
like
of the coal mine industry.
you guys have always wanted to aspire for more.
Yeah.
And then so you're getting this community pressure not to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just really family. It's just like, it's just, you have a good job. Why would you want to go get something else?
Wow.
Because my grandfather was a coal miner. His grandfather was a coal miner. His dad, my dad was a logger. He didn't go into the coal mine industry, but he, it's like they've, it's just like, you don't go outside of these few things.
There's not a lot of value in the neck up.
Right.
In this culture here, it's frowned upon, which is really interesting to me.
That is really interesting.
Yeah. And so
I'm sure the neck up brought a lot of changes in the area.
Yeah.
It's
As
interesting
opposed
because
to
that's the first time I ever heard that phrase before. a neck up.
The neck up.
Yeah. Throughout our entire relationship,
Yeah.
Jean's teaching me Americana and vernacular
Oh,
because I just grew up in a Persian Filipino home. I just don't know any of that stuff. Yeah.
So how was it adjusting to becoming parents?
Oh, it was an adjustment for sure. So I had grown up obviously with 4 younger brothers, and so I knew a decent amount about kids and babies. And
Are you the only girl?
yes,
Okay.
And then you
I-
had all boys.
yes.
Nice.
So but it was good. I mean, of course, the first while you're sleep deprived, and just I wrote everything down. Like, I fed the baby at this time, I'm going to sleep at this time, because I could not remember anything. It was just like, oh my gosh. So but I think we did pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a out of body experience, like that early part of young parenthood, or that child being a newborn the first couple of months it's like we're just taking on water here, and I don't know how to fix it. But yeah, it was a crazy experience, and I think you learn a lot about yourselves. You learn a lot about each other and your relationship in that. I thought it's always been fascinating to me. I think it helped us become stronger in our relationship. It didn't ever tear us apart. It kind of, one of the things that we've talked about, in hindsight, looking back, that I shared with Shastyn, was like the first child, the first year. It's like a pretty lonely existence for the dad, and I remember wrestling with that, just like, man, it's like I'm not even here, and you're also useless to that child, like in a lot of ways. They want mom, and and it's by design, but like we've talked through that a little bit. Like there was some of that. I remember just being like, man, this is lonely, and so, but for the most part, I feel like it was a really healthy addition to our family, and just it was a real big motivator for me, for sure. Like, just for the things we were aspiring to do, businesses we were trying to get off, it's like, all right, I have some purpose now. And I think in some aspects, like, I felt like I was going to fix whatever problems were present, which was not the case actually. But it didn't hurt to have a little bit of more financial stability. And, I think things like that were, for me, they just made it make more sense to me. It didn't get more confusing. It made it more clear, like what I was here to do.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting thing that happens when we have kids, because women are just generous by nature, and we're giving it all to our partners. And then, we got someone else that needs us now. And how does that work out?
Yeah.
Was it lonely for you? I don't know if I ever heard you talk about that.
Yeah, well, you remember my, kind of in the birthing room, I was like, who do I go to?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's like, do I go to
Yeah.
my son in the little crib thing, or do I go to my wife? Who do I go to? And it was a very, difficult position to be in at that point. But yeah, I stayed home with our son for the first 6 months.
Oh wow.
So it was kind of lonely, because it was just me and you were working at that time. So I can understand that.
I think he was like 3 months 3 to 9 months.
Right.
Because
right.
I took him
First
to
3
work
months.
with me. I went back to work like 2 weeks after he was born. But it was an overnight shift that he could come with me, and it was a group home for kids, so they were all sleeping. So you're basically on fire watch and doing laundry. So
Yeah.
yeah. And then your place closed down where you were working.
Right.
Yeah, that was interesting. But I think that was probably really good for you
I
to
think so.
figure that out.
Absolutely.
To have to be a dad.
Yeah. And to have that perspective
Yeah.
too. Yeah. Yeah. I was wondering, you guys were both not homeschooled, correct?
Correct.
Right.
So how did you make that decision to homeschool your kids?
Mostly it was just because 5 came really quickly, and I was like, I can't let go of my baby yet. I want a couple more years with him. And so I really entered into it just because I thought.
Was he your only one at the time?
No, we had Lassen,
Okay.
and he was they're about 3 years different.
Okay.
So Lassen was a couple years old, but I just wasn't quite ready to send him to school. And I am somewhat of a controlling person, so I was just like, is he going to be safe at school, and everything. And I just felt like it was, I could do it for a couple years. I'm like, it's kindergarten, first grade, or whatever, and I thought I could easily handle that. And we knew multiple people who had been homeschooling, so I thought, I had some resources too. And so, but I thought it's ABCs, I can swing it. And so I did that. And then it's, as the couple years went by, and Lassen, he was just not ready to go to school. He didn't want to learn anyway.
I don't know if he'll ever be ready.
No, no, he is.
He's a
one-
mountain boy.
He's so more resistant to the school, setting,
Yeah.
but he is, he was just not really ready to be in not really wanting to go or do any learning anyways, even with me. So we just did what we could at home when he was in the mood to do school. And then just kind of the school systems just kind of changed. And so we've just remained and kept doing it. So it was kind of just timing, really, of why. I mean, there were for a couple of years we gave Hector the option every year, like, do you want to go to public school? Are you wanting to do that? And they've always done sports and things, so they, interact with other kids and know a lot of kids through those, and through the different seasons throughout the year. But yeah, that's why we chose that. And it's been different. When we were kids, I felt like homeschool.
It's like a stigma there.
Yeah, it was just kind of, homeschoolers were really weird, and they were non-sociable, and that was the one thing I was worried about. But I mean, they are not.
Yeah, it seems like schools went from like helping kids develop in other areas to so overreaching that they're keeping them infants now. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
ridiculous. So
Yeah, the environment was. I had a harder time, I think, with like getting on board with the homeschool, because it wasn't anything I was familiar with, and so it just felt odd to me. I had all these friends, and we like did all the things we shouldn't do, and but there was somehow value in that. But
Right.
it's like trying to justify it,
Sure.
But
being naughty little boys.
yeah, and kind of as we went along after the preschool and like pre-K and like we have some fantastic educators in our area here. Like, I think we have the teachers here. They're working against that grain in a lot of situations, and I think they do a fantastic job. And what kind of gave me that more of that comfort was, one, it fit our family really well. It made us, we were a little more nimble, and our kids seemed to like the extra free time, and I like them being kids. But it's also like an equipping that I feel like they need to have. They're not going to get that in the system the way that it's designed right now, in my eyes. Like, I think they need to learn how to think for themselves, to be critical thinkers. And so it was almost like we have a different responsibility. We do have to teach them these things, but we also have to teach them how the world is going to be and how to handle it and what they're going to have to deal with. And it's got nothing to do with ABCs.
Yeah.
And the homeschool structure, I think, gives us an opportunity and a platform to do that for them.
Is there a long-term plan? Like, at some point they would go into a high school level, or if they want to go to college, what kind of concerns you guys have about that?
Possibly. I mean, it is kind of year to year as Hector's getting older and they're all getting older. I think, oh, can I handle these? But we do have, like I said, a lot of resources, lots of friends who have kids graduating that have been homeschooled a lot and things, which is comforting to me, because then I have people who have,
Have done it.
yeah, and have gone different ways. And so I'm not really opposed to, at this point, I guess, it seems like laws and everything are changing every day and different things are happening. So that might be a year-to-year decision. But I'm not really against them going to high school if they want to. But I think even Hector has become very accustomed to kind of his 4-hour work week. Like, he can be on his own time, and he knows if he wants to have more free time, he needs to work a little extra these few days and just add to his plate so he can have a day off, an extra day or something. And we do schedule days off, but we're only going 4 days a week right now and things. But I do think that we are blessed here. They can do sports through the school, even if they're homeschoolers. So, and that was always kind of because we were both athletes, that just it's kind of like, I don't want them to miss out on that kind of stuff. And so I do feel like they'll be able to do that either way. And so, but it is just kind of year to year and seeing what the public schools are doing, because if they're teaching things we don't agree with, or they're environments we don't necessarily want them in, then we can make that choice. And but
As far as Hector goes, I think we give him a lot of, he carries a lot of weight in the conversation. And so I think we spend a lot of our time helping them understand what our role is. Like, we're here to equip you and prepare you. And the older you get, the more decisions you get them start making for yourself. And so, I think he's, even Lassen, like, I think in my mind, they're going to get to make that decision. And they're going to have to evaluate and critically think the situation and the environment and decide if they feel like that's the right place for them to go. And I don't really want to force them into any of it. I feel like if we do our job right, and I think they'll be ready to make a decision there. And I have full confidence they would be okay, whichever decision they made.
And already they don't, like Hector, he really likes engineering and building things. And, he may be more likely to go to college, and Lassen may surprise me, but he's, if there was a wilderness school, he would be in it. I mean, he wants to be a park ranger. He loves photography. He just loves traveling. He might be our, whimsical.
Mountains call to him.
And Charlie will be a doctor.
He's the boss. We call him,
Boss baby.
he's the boss. He's always telling them what to do. So we think he'll be in management for sure.
So what was faith like for the two of you growing up? Like, what did you learn from your parents about faith? And then when you went through that whole faith crisis, right, when your dad passed, like, what was that like for you? And also, what was that like for both of you together? And where are you guys at now with your faith?
Yeah. Here we go.
Well, growing up, my grandfather would come pick me and my cousin up and take us to church, and my
What kind of church?
It was a Baptist church.
Okay.
So we grew up Baptist, and in Peonia we would go. And so mostly I grew up going to Baptist church as a young girl. And then by teenage years, we went to it's Quaker, so I don't know what that is technically, but the Friends Church in Crawford, or Saddle Mountain. And so we went there, and my mom was a pretty regular. She went to church. She was a faithful woman, and my great grandmother was always a very good, faithful person. She always had her Bible open, even whether she was sleeping or reading it. She had it open, and so I grew up, learning a belief in God. And then when I was about 17, I went on a youth trip to California, and that's where I accepted the Lord into my life, and didn't necessarily change my life a whole lot at that point, because I was young and just didn't really, I don't feel like I had a lot of guidance in after, like, what do you do after you accept the Lord into your heart? And so, but there was always that compass for me of just like right and wrong. I felt like the Holy Spirit was there telling me, I want you to do something different. Whether I listened to it or not, I feel like that was there. And so then I think it was about 2010 or so, a couple years after we got married, that I really just felt like I needed to lean back into my faith. We had been going to church, and him somewhat reluctantly, but he would go with me. And so, but I leaned back into my faith more then, and decided I wanted it to be a bigger part of my life, and to change my life. And so that's the moment I did that. And now I'm a believer, and I live my life the best I can, obviously. And we've taught our kids, and I'm excited for them, because I feel like they've, God is an everyday part of their life. They've known from a very young age that he is part of us. And I think that's really cool. I'm excited to see how they grow through those wilder years of being teenagers and young kids. Because I think for me, that seemed like such a hard, well, I'll be better when I'm older, it'll be easier to be a good Christian person when I'm, older and more settled. And so I'm hoping.
And it is.
Mm-hmm.
It is. Without all those extra hormonal temptations and things.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that just our guidance and things will.
But it wasn't important to you to bring them up in a specific religion per se.
No, not necessarily. I mean, I guess growing up in a, what I would say Christian, there was Baptist and there was different, but I feel like just growing up with a belief, I do feel like was important. I wanted them to have a belief in Jesus but other than that, I don't know. We haven't really ever had much more of a introduction to any other beliefs, I guess. And
Yeah, I mean, I think for our kids, like they have more familiarity with the early church in the Book of Acts than they have with the American church right now. Of what it was designed to do, how it was supposed to act, the things that occurred there, and so we do a home church, and that's a really strong representation of what that looked like, and so I think we really try to drive with them that one, they have to decide what it is that they believe, and that our faith can't be their faith, and so we really try to focus on those things with them, that you guys get to read these things, interpret them, and you decide what's pulling on your heart, and so. But as far as denominations go, it's not I don't see any evidence of that biblically, and so we have elected to leave that out of the curriculum, I guess.
But I do feel like I love that they're intimidated by the Bible, because growing up, it seemed like, we had our little lessons in Sunday school and things. But to me, just to open the Bible and read it was just like, ugh, this is huge. And it's so intimidating. And now as an adult, I realize how many just stories are in there. But when I was, when I was a kid, it was like, all right, I remember one time, maybe I was early teenager, and I was like, I'm going to read the Bible from front to back. And it was like, I got to page 3 and I was like, oh.
That beginning's pretty hard.
Yeah, it is. But
There's a lot in there.
But nobody ever taught me about, that you don't necessarily have to read it in chronological order, that it's, there's lots of meat in there, just, in different places. And there are some of the books that are just, they're not irrelevant, but they're just factual. And there are other parts that are a lot more interesting because they're an actual story and they're a lot more easy to read. So I think it would have been nice to know those as a young child and as a kid, to just know, there are funner parts of the Bible to read than trying to just be like, this is how it's supposed to be read. And so I don't necessarily, I love that they're getting to be a part of our church the way it is, just because they learn so much. They know things that I'm like, I don't even know that, they just soak it all in. And I love that, because I do feel like, traditionally it's like I would go to Sunday school and color a picture, or, learn maybe a Bible verse, but it was like, that's, that was the depth of it. And I love that they are just learning it in depth, and to where they do have more of an informed decision to make, and it's not something that.
And their voice gets to get heard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
I think
Yes.
so.
Yes.
My grandmother was kind of the spiritual counselor of our on my mom's side of our family, and I don't remember going to church with her very often. My dad was a Catholic background, which isn't surprising coming from Mexico, right?
We're very familiar with that. We're both raised Catholic.
Yeah. And so I didn't attend church with either of my parents. There was a young man, he was an older man, although 60 doesn't seem as old as it once did. So.
Right?
His name was Don Oaks, and he was in the Hotchkiss area. He was a very successful neck up. He was just tons of philanthropic work. And Don would pick me up on Sunday mornings. I hardly knew the guy, and he would come and get my sister and I and take us to the Baptist church. And his granddaughter was in my school class. And why he decided to pick us up, I have no idea. I never got a chance to ask him. But we used to go to church with him and his granddaughter, and we went to a Baptist church. The one we attended, I felt like was more of a kind of the fire and brimstone. It just did not make sense to me, and it was a very fearful, terrifying thought. But there was the foundation blocks kind of got laid in that place, and so I would take those things, and I remember asking my grandmother about it, and she was much more consistent with her understanding of what the Bible actually said, what the accuracy of what I was told. And so I kind of used her as my sounding board just to try to unpack some of that stuff.
And your parents at that time were okay with you going to a Baptist church?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I wasn't at home, so. Sundays off, right?
They were overwhelmed in their own worlds.
Yeah. So that part, it didn't have a huge influence in me, and so when I went through losing my dad, which was there wasn't a real strong foundation there, and everybody everybody just broke spiritually, physically. I mean, it crumbled off, and so in that moment, I can remember there was a pastor that came to our house the day after we lost my dad, and I remember him sitting on the edge of my bed with me, and he's just telling me like, oh, God loves you, and I'm like, really? Sure doesn't feel like it. I just been thinking like, you are so full of crap, you know, and there was no explanation provided other than like that was like that. I'm like, what an easy way to get out of a tough situation. I mean, even at that age, I felt that way. Like, this is lip service, man. You know, you're killing me. And so it was just like, I've had enough of this. I'm going to go to hell. At least I'll go there having a good time, you know, like it. And so I just kind of shook my fist in the air.
Have you resolved that?
Yeah. I mean, I think a big part of that, you know, it did come to a point through Shastyn's encouragement. I mean, she said I went reluctantly, but it was kind of like hey, we're going to church today. You know, it's like,
well, and I do
statement.
It wasn't a do you want to?
Not a
Just
question.
Get in the car.
And long before that, I actually do remember after the month we broke up, I remember sitting on our couch, or my couch, and I remember telling him like, you need to get right with God and like figure it out before like this could ever be anything. You're just, because I knew he was angry with God and he still blamed God or whatever, and just had things to sort out. And so I remember, and at that point, I was by no means like living this halo life or anything, but I just remember telling him that. And sometimes I do feel like that's just God speaking through us, you know, and it's like, I think it was like years later that he brought it up to me and I was like, oh yeah, I did say that, you know, I guess I did.
Yeah.
But I do feel like that was not like the complete pivotal moment, but I do feel like it was something that turned him to just kind of, you know, helping him figure out a little bit more like what was going on with himself, because I was like, if you can't, like, you need to sort that stuff out before this can even like move in a different direction, because it's just like chaos, you know. And so, but I do feel like we were going to church and that helped. We were of course, you know, we were going to Canyon View at the time, and it was, you know, big. I don't even know how many thousands of people or whatever, you know, big old auditorium.
Big box church. Yeah.
And it was a great church, but it's kind of one of those you can slip into the pew or out. Nobody really knows whether you're there or not. But we did. I tried to get involved, and we helped with like the church garden and did some things, you know, just to try to, you know, not just show up on Sunday. And
do you remember going to it was like the orientation?
yes,
That's what broke it for me.
That's
I
what,
remember
yeah,
that.
we ended up kind of quitting after that, because they were like, you know, basically you need to sign this paper to say you're a part of this church. And we were like, that's weird.
Yeah,
you
and
know,
I just
like,
slid it back across the table. I'm like, we're out of here.
yeah.
One of the big box churches in the Chicago area, they have you submit your tax forms, your taxes. Oh yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah.
That would make me very uncomfortable. I was like, I'm not signing my name. That was all they asked for us. I was just like, But it was simultaneously his friend. They went on a baseball trip together, and he had kind of somewhere around there a little after that.
Yeah, there's this, when I was in high school, this baseball club, called the No Bats Baseball Club. And they pick a charity, somewhere, a baseball or softball oriented charity. It's just a big group of guys that love baseball, all extremely successful. And they have enough connections that they take groups of kids to big league parks, and they play a tournament, and then they donate a bunch of money to their local little league,
Cool.
programs. Or anyway, I got a letter in the mail one day from Joe Cocker, and he said, hey, I was talking to these guys, and they're going to come out, and they want to do this baseball thing for you. Or they asked us who it was, and your name came up at the table, so we're going to send you and this friend that Shastyn's talking about. We're going to have a banquet, and all these guys are actually going to come to Crawford. They all want to come here and play baseball. And we
Wow.
we had this whole thing. We had a big dinner at Joe's, and they brought me. I vividly remember this. The first pair of new baseball cleats I ever got, a brand new glove. They bought us
Wow.
all new stuff. It was like, wow. Go
Wait,
ahead.
which for the listeners, Joe Cocker actually used to live like
In Crawford.
Yeah, there's
Yes.
a couple
Crawford,
miles
just a
from.
couple, a couple miles from you guys. Yeah, so he's a big guy, big name around here.
Yeah. Yes.
And was extremely generous to our youth sports programs here. And so all our guys came, and they did a big banquet. We played baseball here for a couple of days, and then they took us on a trip to Seattle. We went to the Seattle Mariners Stadium, got to hang out at a game there, and go in the dugout or in the players' quarters, and it was really fun.
You and
Cool.
one other kid, right?
That's
Ricky.
awesome.
Yeah,
Ricky.
so this is the kid I was going. We were going to a no bats function. He invited me to go. Same guy. that
Years
went
later.
on that trip with me when we were in high school.
Yes.
And
And so it had been what, 10 years?
I hadn't talked to him in 10 years. He called me out of the blue and said, "Hey, you should go. We're going to go to the Texas Ranger Stadium, and we get to play baseball for a few days, and you should come. Nolan Ryan's going to be there. It'll be fun."
Nolan
I'm
Ryan.
like, "Great, let's
Wow.
go." Anyway, we get in the car, and he's like, "So, tell me about yourself." Which I'm like, "I don't really want." He's like, "Well, we have a 4.5 hour drive to the airport, so we got to talk about something."
What have you
And,
done for 10 years?
So he started just sharing with me his background. He had just finished playing baseball for the New York Mets. He got drafted and was fantastic ball player. So we just kind of caught up on stuff. We showed up down there. We go to this bar. There's 42 men in there hooting and hollering. We do a draft, and I just remember the environment. You know, I'm like, "Do you want a beer?" And he's like, "Nah, I'm not going to drink on this trip." I'm like, "Yeah, okay." So guys get done, and there's a big group of them. I remember them just being like, "Hey, we're going to go to the strip club. Who's going?" These guys were like, "Oh, we're going to hit down to the bars." And he's like, "I'm going to go back to my hotel room." And then I just remember him being like, "What are you going to do?" And I'm like, "I'm going to hang out with you." He's like, "Okay." And he just kept prodding me like, "What, like, where you at spiritually?" And he just poking me. And he ended up facilitating, you know, we had like Skype men's groups meetings that he would run, and I started joining those. And I really just got to a point where I dove in to really make a decision, and came out on my knees asking for Jesus to be the Lord of my life. And I just couldn't help myself when I got to the other end, and it just changed me. And that was, you know, my early 20s.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Mid-20s.
I'm in my mid 30s
Who's counting?
right now, so.
You know, give or take.
Yeah, there's not enough of that good mentorship in our male society these days that
Yeah.
there's a lot of pull in the wrong direction for relationships. So
Yes.
it's, you know, it's hard to be that guy that says, "Nope, I'm not doing that kind of stuff."
Yeah.
You know?
Especially with overwhelming pressure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and so that was a big part of our move back here. When we did have Hector, I think the idea, but part of it was like, I got to get away. I remember telling Shastyn, like, I got to get away from the city. Even though Grand Junction's not a huge city, it was city enough.
Yeah.
And it was like, I got to get a distance from this. And so I mean, in hindsight, I look back, I think it was the best decision for my own personal development, the best decision I could have ever made. Because I got up here, I got involved in men's groups. I had guys mentoring me. It was such a healthy environment. All guys who were trying to have healthy marriages and raise good kids. And that's the dynamic I wanted to be in. It was just,
It's kind of why we built this place, because we always wanted a gathering place. And there's not a lot out there that's supportive of, you know, those good values and stuff. And so, you know, even in our old house, we never found it, so we built it. And we've always had families over. We're not like, you know, it's not just adults, you know. It was kind of interesting in Ireland, was like that. You know, it was a place of gathering, and there were like normal people there, not just the single guys that are really getting drunk or something like that. It was a, you know, a place to celebrate, and there was a lot of music there. And that's why we like to have something like this.
yeah.
Yeah.
So last question. What is it that your partner does that you know they love you?
Do you want to go first, or should I go first?
If you have something, you should go first. I'm thinking.
Well, he does a lot for me, and he, you know, he'll do the dishes. and he will give me a massage anytime I want. You know, he's just like, and he's very good at giving massages. And
Not for hire though.
not for her. That's true. That's true.
Got to clarify that.
Yeah.
But one thing, and this may not be like something he actually does, but I still, after all these years, just feel like I know that I just love him so much, because he will drive in the driveway and I still get like the little tingle in my stomach, like you did when you're just like a teenager. You're like, oh my gosh, there he is, you know? And of course, then it's, you know, drowned out by the boys being like, Dad's out! And then, you know, it's like moments over. But he does a lot for me, and he is always looking out for me, and he will tell you touch is not necessarily my first love language. And so, but he's always snuggling with me and loving on me, and he refuses. I'm the talker, and he's like, you know, we will snuggle and we will be lovey. And so between the two,
Not a question.
between the two of us,
You will talk and I will touch you.
yes. So, but he never lets a day go by that I don't know that he loves me. And so it's good motivation for me to, you know, remind myself to give him a love too, and to reach out and let him know that I love him too, because I'm just not as good at showing it.
Yeah, I think mine is that she trusts me, and that's so valuable to me, that when I have to travel for work or I have things that are outside of our normal wheel, to hear that from her, and I just get to see it every day, like that's how I know. So
Well, we want to thank you guys for being here today. And, you know, couples have been sharing stories for thousands of years to learn and heal and grow. And we hope that by you guys sharing your story, it's enriched your lives and the lives of our listeners.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us.
I want to thank all of you for joining us on Couples Synergy today. Our passion is in helping couples and people have happy and healthy relationships, and this podcast gives us a fun way of bringing our knowledge and expertise to you, our listeners. For all of you listening, please let us know how you enjoyed the show. If you have any questions, comments, or topic suggestions, please email us at contact@couplessynergy.com. For more information about Couples Synergy and our programs such as Relationship 101, the home study course, the next Couples Relationship Enhancement Weekend, and our premier couples coaching program called Couple to Couple, look us up online at couplessynergy.com.
And if you know someone who could benefit from this episode, please download it and listen and share it. And thank you for listening.
Until next time, synergize your life and synergize your love.
You have been listening to Couple Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. Couple Synergy was recorded, edited, and produced by Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. Voiceover and music entitled Breathe and Let Go was recorded and composed by Gina Gonzalez.